This morning, we are being a voice for the victims as we search for answers to 3 separate unsolved attacks in 2007. 3 mothers visiting the same Boca Raton, Florida mall were attacked in the middle of the day during a 9-month period. One mother and her 2-year-old son were kidnapped but survived. 2 of the mothers were killed, and 1 child is included in that. Randy Gornberg and Nancy Boquicchio and her young daughter Joey are those 3 victims. And the loved ones they left behind all these years later want answers.
My husband and I both promised her that before we came to meet her, we'd find this guy. That's what I think every day. And I say to the police, you know, I need them to catch him. I feel that as a mother, I know my sister, the kind of mother she was. She's not at peace. I just pray to God that at least someday I can meet her and tell her they got him and he's paying.
The police did release a sketch of the person they believe to be responsible for the killing of Nancy and her daughter Joey, and they believe that these cases are connection and that the mall was the connection. Let's bring in our guest, criminologist, author, and professor at St. Thomas University, Dr. Debbie Goodman. Dr. Goodman, this is such a difficult case for these families because no major leads other than that sketch that we just showed all of these years later, since 2007. But investigators were able to determine that each of these groups, these either women and children or women by themselves, were at the mall at some point before these attacks happened. Now, they all didn't get killed at the mall, but they were able to trace back their steps, believing that they may have been tracked from the mall. I first want to get your initial reaction to this case and what this must be like for those victims who survived, but still no arrests.
Absolutely. Good morning, Julia, and it's a pleasure to join you. And yes, this is again another heartbreaking, gut-wrenching case. Anytime we have victimization, victimology, and just to briefly remind the viewers, you know, there are different steps and stages to this. We call it primary, secondary, tertiary. So primary victimization is when the individual himself or herself gets harmed or ultimately now in this case has been killed. Secondary victimization is just like the mother from whom we heard so terrified and just life shattered of the loss of the loved one. That's the secondary victimization of family and friends. And now the rest of us, of course, is considered tertiary victimization. We hear about this, we're astonished, we're shocked. How could it be? Where is this killer? And who's going to find him and when? So, as you suggest about this case, 3 different aspects, yet the commonality, the common thread of this mall. So that's very significant because remember, killers, no matter which category of killer we're talking about, a singular homicide, double, triple, quadruple, mass murderer, serial murderer, workplace violence, serial killer, school-based shooter, they all are very intentional, Julia. So they will spend time, considerable time, effort, energy, deciding the 5 W's and the H, as we refer to it in criminal justice: who, what, when, where, why, and how. They tend to have a plan and they think it through and they follow it out.
And that's what investigators believe happened here, but they are still spinning their wheels as to who may be the one responsible. Let's take a listen to just an overview of the impact that this case has had on the survivors, the victims' families, but also those investigators.
I'm driven by this case because anyone who can shoot a 7-year-old girl in the face and her mother is dangerous, beyond dangerous, sociopath, killer, hunter of women. And I'd like to see this guy caught. Everybody would like to see this guy caught.
Every year it gets harder to keep the hope, but I do. because I know the police is still working on it.
They believe someone somewhere knows something.
This case affected me. It affected everyone who worked on it. You know, don't get personally involved in cases, but there's no way you can work a case like this without taking it personal. I'd like to think I had a good career. I'd like to think we put some bad guys away and worked some big cases, but it's not fulfilled, not complete.
When you said you had a picture of Joey Boquicchio on your desk, do you still have that photo?
I do, Nancy and Joey.
All right, Dr. Goodman, you see there just a snippet of what has been happening over the last decade and a half in this case, and these investigators that have been trying to figure out why this person was, you heard the word there, and you mentioned it, hunting. This was their hunting ground. What do you think it was about these victims? This was a mom with a young child. This was someone who was just in the store looking for gift cards. This is just hard to wrap your head around, but what are you picking up when you're hearing these details from a criminologist standpoint?
Yes, well, again, Julia, you know, even the clips from law enforcement, it also shows their level of devotion and dedication and how they too are impacted as husbands and wives and boyfriends, girlfriends, and so they're doing their absolute best. But you're right, you know, we all go to a mall and knowing this particular mall, by the way, it's considered in a high-end area with lovely stores and restaurants, and in broad daylight also, you know, it's again, as you suggest, very difficult to wrap one's head around all of this. However, the commonalities of being the moms, being the women, being at the mall, that's very significant. And so law enforcement, I know, is continuing very diligently and dutifully to solve this. And I believe they will. I know it seems like it's been a terribly long time, 17 years. However, with DNA and with just the knowledge, even the segment you've titled as The Missing Piece, there's always the missing piece to a case, and once we can identify what that is, there it is. There will be the arrest and the process for the perpetrator of this. So I know law enforcement will never give up hope, and nor will the victims' families, and that's very important. And I believe one day this case will come to resolution and we will have a suspect in custody.
That is certainly the hope of these family members. Let's take a listen to the mother of one of those victims, the woman who was alone at the time, Randy Gornberg. Let's listen to her mother, I.D. Elias.
I came home and I went into the bedroom and I laid down. I put on the news. It was 5 o'clock news, and they were showing a scene of the police finding a body. And I said to myself, I said, oh my God, that poor family, when they find out who this is, how hurtful. And about maybe 5 minutes later, 10 minutes later, I get a phone call.
Debbie, what's the process for investigators who are no doubt still trying to see if there are any other cases that connect to this one? Do you think it's possible that someone just did these connected murders and then stopped?
Yes, Julia, it is possible. And in our history of these types of murderers, they can literally flip the switch the same way they decide to do it. And it went on for 9 months. They can easily decide they're done. They relocate, they get married, they start a job, and all of a sudden their past is in the rear view, and now they're just focused on the future.
All right, Dr. Goodman, thank you so much for all of your insight for this segment in particular where we're focusing on the victims. We do also want to let people know if something in this piece has triggered something that you remember that could potentially help investigators. You are urged to call Crime Stoppers there in that county. We have that number, 1-800-458-TIPS, 1-800-458-TIPS.